Hello, everybody. My name is Bruce Johnson. I'm the Marketing Manager for CVE Technologies. First, I'd like to thank you for being with us today. I think you're going to be well rewarded for listening in on this session today. So thanks Alkira, for doing that. And I will then go ahead and tell you just real briefly what we're going to be doing. So bottom line, in our webinar today, you're going to learn how you can greatly streamline the process of setting up your multi-cloud network. Many of you have probably already found out how difficult it can be as soon as you start trying to connect to more than one in a multi-cloud network. So we're going to hopefully make your lives easier by showing you how you can streamline that whole process. So with us today from Alkira, we have Doug Houghton. He's the Director of Channels for Alkira in the U.S. He's got 12+ years in networking experience, supporting customers all over the world, working in WAN optimization, SD-WAN, and multi-cloud. Then we'll also have David Klebanoff with us. He's been in the networking industry for over 20 years. His expertise extends across the wide area network, data center, and the cloud. So it's a great combination of skills and experience to have. And then at the end, we'll have a few minutes, we'll hear from John Judd. Many of you have met John Judd already, and if not, you will enjoy meeting him. He's an extremely skilled engineer who's been with our team for about a year now. He's got a lot of experience on the customer side, implementing cloud networking for multiple businesses here in the Salt Lake area, and he would love to work with you on your cloud networking challenges as well. So without further ado, let's turn it over to Doug first, and we'll get into the meat of this. Go ahead, Doug.
Thank you, Bruce, and I'd like to thank the greater CVE team for inviting us to meet with your customers and prospects today. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us today. As Bruce inferred, we're going to discuss multi-cloud, more specifically Alkira. My colleague David will give you, as soon as I'm done talking, an overview of our solution, a live demo. And between the two of us, we're going to cross off on about 3 or 4 slides. I'll apologize in advance. I'm in the middle of a very small room with bad lighting. I seem to, it's like every date I've ever gone on, I have to apologize to start the date. So if you'll bear with me in my bad lighting, I think you'll at least enjoy the slides and the presentation. So
Doug, I think you made up for that apology by the fact that you said you have a grand total of 4 slides. I want everybody to hear that. 4 slides, not 104, just 4.
I have to share the right thing first, so let me do that real quick. But so sincerest apologies, everybody. Let me find there we go. Okay, so again, Alkira, which means a happy place in the sun, was founded by Amir and Atif Khan, and they're my bosses, and I worked with them previously at Viptela, and they really defined the software-defined wide area network space. And this is another, not an iteration on SD-WAN, but an iteration to solve a bunch of really interesting problems. The first of which Bruce has already discussed. How do you tie multiple assets across disparate clouds, public or otherwise, together, do so easily, and incorporate security or other networking services into that fabric, if you will? We have a customer, as you'll see on the screen, Coke, who built their own sort of AWS instance with orchestration. It took them about 18 months. And then when their boss came and said, we'd love to do the same thing in Azure, they said, that's absolutely impossible. I'll never be able to do it. And so this is, the big problem that we solve is complexity. And it's the complexity of organizing the native constructs, the VPCs, the VNets, and the VCNs, to work seamlessly together, to integrate networking services together, to get the governance and visibility that you need, and to reduce your TCO, your total cost of operations. So founded in 2018 by Amir and Atif Khan. We were funded by Sequoia and Google Ventures and Kleiner Perkins, so some small names in the Valley. We launched and came out of stealth in 2020. And we've got about 50 customers at this point. And I will say that I'm really excited to do this with CVE because they've been an absolutely super productive partner for us. They've skilled up. They absolutely will walk you through this multi-cloud journey. And with the Alkira solution, as you'll see, we've really consolidated how you're going to interoperate those disparate assets across those disparate clouds. Our ecosystem partners also on the slide, they include Silver Peak and Cisco and Checkpoint and Palo Alto and Hashi, Terraform, and Azure, obviously. We work across all the public clouds and across all the public cloud availability zones. So I'm going to transfer the slides and we'll get started. So the Alkira network, think of it as a fabric across all of the clouds, right? If I go into AWS, I can't take my on-prem networking knowledge into AWS. What I do is when I show up at AWS and I'm trying to connect a whole bunch of VPCs together, I have to use the native constructs, or I did have to use those native constructs to organize those VPCs and to try to integrate firewalling and application delivery controllers, other networking services like DDI, so DNS, DHCP, etc. I had to do all that stuff in the native construct. And then I go to Azure and I do the same thing. I'm talking in a new language, it's the Azure language, and I have to do those same tasks and I put all that stuff together. Same with Oracle, same with GCP. And then if I go across all of the availability zones and I go global, that becomes a fairly large and complex task. What we've done is place this giant overlay on top of all of these clouds. We use a singular and consolidated language to really build this fabric, allowing the user to transition from months and months of work, like Koch did, to minutes. And it's almost, as you see it, you'll realize that how transformative it actually is. We've really taken the absolute complexity out of this entire thing and provide this network as a service across all of these clouds in that fabric model that I'm talking about. So what we're looking at in the middle of the screen, these hexagon things are called cloud exchange portals. And effectively, they're a network service, a virtual router, a hub, a colo. One way to think about us, and I've heard this described, is we're a virtual colo on top of every hyperscaler, publicly available hyperscaler. These CXPs, as I suggested, come out of the box fully meshed, so they talk to the other CXPs no matter the geography and no matter the availability zone. We use a multitude of connectivity options to bring on-prem workloads into these CXPs or the cloud workloads into this CXP. You can do direct connect, express route, IPsec, Akamai CDN, or your SD-WAN fabric, right? We're also working on GRE. We connect all of the remote sites and assets to include data centers, your colos, if you've got assets there, SD-WAN, as I suggested, remote users, etc. The most powerful thing, in my personal opinion, about our platform or this fabric is the ability to natively integrate networking services into this and to do so really easily. So think of this. If I want to work across all the clouds you see at the top of the screen, I need to do firewalling. If I have a Palo Alto license, we have a native integration with Palo. So I can bring my own license and very easily put a firewall in the middle to do the traffic inspection I need or to protect the edge. Same with NAT, same with IDS, IPS, same with WAN ops, same with DDI services. We have an integration with Infoblox now, a native integration with Infoblox and Checkpoint and Fortinet and Zscaler. This platform is really, it's disruptive in that it makes it really easy to tie all these assets together, but it's not disruptive in terms of using things that you already have workflows built, namely your firewalls, right? It's really easy, as David will show you, to integrate those firewalls. All right, we support the whole thing with APIs. And you get, we've got I'm not going to steal Dave's thunder. So let's just move to the next slide. All right, David, the floor is yours, sir.
All right. Well, thank you, Doug, for the introduction. So here's what I'm going to run you through in the next half an hour or so. So we're going to build a network together. So I'm going to show you what it is that is needed to build this network along the lines of what Doug has described. So what you see in here on the right-hand side, it's kind of a graphical representation of what I'm going to look like. And you see it's on a PowerPoint, but you'll be surprised to see that building a network in Alkira solution is no different than drawing it on an actual slide or a visual diagram. It almost sounds unreal. It almost sounds that this is not the way that networks are supposed to be built. But that is the level of simplification that we're bringing into the solution, right? So I'm going to start with sort of a simple case of a single region deployment and create a single segment for that region, and then start assigning cloud workloads from AWS into that segment, and then add multi-cloud into that segment, which would be Azure, and add internet exit into this segment for SaaS and internet applications. And then I'm going to expand into another region and create basically a presence of your network in two different regions with a high speed, low latency cloud backbone connecting these two regions together, and adding an on-prem site such as on-prem data centers and branches, because we obviously understand that nobody has a completely clean slate. You connect your existing resources, be those in the cloud or outside of the cloud, into the environment. So we're going to connect the on-prem stuff that you have today, which is the data centers and branches. And then when all the connectivity is done, I'm going to add the firewalls into this and show you how easy it is to insert a firewall of choice into the network and just, do an intent-based policy to decide on which traffic out of this entire mix of cloud, multi-cloud, and on-prem resources that are connected to the network, what is the mix of traffic that you would like to send to the firewall, so your security administrators can continue enforcing sort of uniform firewall security policy, be that for resources in Alkira network or connected to Alkira network, or the same firewalls could be, or the same firewall vendor could also be servicing your traditional sort of environment that has not yet transitioned to Alkira. So the same management system for the firewalls can now enforce that policy for both the transitioned environments to Alkira and the non-transitioned environments. And at the very end, I'm going to show you kind of a sneak peek of something pretty cool called Cloud Insights, and I'll save that for for the later. All right, Doug, you can stop sharing, and then I will start. I'll start sharing my screen. So what we have created, as Doug has alluded to, let me start sharing. Here we go. So what we have created is a platform, right? It's an as a service platform. It's a network as a service platform. It behaves very similar to a software as a service, which means like any cloud application that you might be familiar with, something which is as complex as SFDC, or something as intuitive as WebEx and Zoom or Office 365, whatever sort of, however you think about the cloud applications, that's what we have done for networking and network security. Is we've created this platform which is consumed as a service and very similar in its consumption as a software as a service, right? Now, what you see in here is basically a portal that you would log into in order to start your journey, start provisioning, administering, monitoring, troubleshooting your network, right? So the first step that we are skipping here is actually the registration process. So you would basically register your company for an account within an Alkira platform, and you would decide on the administrator username and password. Now, you would get your own particular URL, right? That's how, obviously it's not going to look like this, but you're going to have your particular URL that you're going to open your browser and just go there and log into the system. Now, once you're logged in, The first thing we're going to do is basically establish where your network is located, right? So this is the presence of our platform. It's globally distributed. By the way, you can see some of those things are kind of, some of those signs are blue, some of those are grayed out. This is all a matter of permissions. So for anything that you see in this presentation that is grayed out, you can consider that that could be, made available to you, right? So if you have a regional network, you can select a specific region. If you have a national network, you can select multiple regions. If you have a global network, you can select multiple, continents and the presence of our platform. Our platform rides completely on top of the clouds. We do not operate any data centers. We do not operate any co-location facilities. We do not operate any hardware. Our platform is entirely based on the hyperscale infrastructure, which gives us virtually unlimited capacity and virtually unlimited reach for where we can position our platform. So it's a huge advantage for us to be able to leverage all of this investment that the AWS and Azures and GCPs of the world have done for their own networks. We're leveraging all of that might to power our platform that runs on top of that. Now, I'm going to start with, like I said, something pretty simple. So I'm going to choose one location. We're going to start with US East, right? So basically, I'm establishing a footprint of my network in the US East Coast region, right? So you see this square in here, right? Or rectangle in here. That is what Doug has called in the slides as CXP. So it's a cloud exchange point. So think about this as a virtual co-location or a virtual point of presence that is offered to you as a service by Alkira. And all you need to do is just connect your resources, cloud resources, on-premises resources, insert your services in the middle. All of that converges in those cloud exchange points. Now, you don't need to buy any hardware. You don't need to download any software. This is a completely service-based solution, cloud service-based solution, right? So now you can imagine that you have purchased a network presence at US East Coast, right? And it's blank. There's really nothing in here because we haven't really connected anything. And now we're going to go through a process of connecting your resources into the network. So we're going to start, I'm going to just refresh the screen for a second. We're going to start with something really simple, which is the clouds, right? So you can see if I'll zoom in here, you have clouds on the right, you have your on-premise users and sites on the left, you have your services in the middle. And we're going to work with all three of those, but we'll start with connectors on the cloud side. So just clicking plus takes you to this screen that says, well, what cloud would you like to connect? So these are the cloud workloads that you have in your environment. That's where your cloud teams are deploying their cloud applications. They could be in any one of those 4 clouds that we support today, which is overwhelmingly what we're seeing across the board. These are the main clouds, and out of this mix, obviously AWS and Azure are the first 2 that we're seeing. So I'll start with AWS. So I'm clicking on AWS and saying, yes, I would like to add an AWS workload into this. So now I need to authenticate into my AWS accounts. So for those of you who work with cloud and cloud environments, these are the 2 major things or major authentication mechanisms that exist within AWS. It is a role-based, IAM roles-based, based on identity, or it's a key-based, which is a simpler model based on sort of username and password, so to speak, right? We recommend people to do role-based because that's by far much more secure way. We support that, but for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to use key-based, so it's simpler, right? Now, I already one account loaded in here. If when you start from scratch, you don't have any accounts loaded in, you would create a new account, and the details of that account is going to come from whoever administers an AWS environment in your case, right? Once the account is added, we keep that account in a system. So basically, you can think about that we also have this cloud account management built into the system, so you don't have to always remember what the credentials are to authenticate to this account. And as you keep on sort of adding workloads into the network, you don't have to remember that. You just go and it appears on a list, you select that. The next one is the region, because clouds are based on regions, right? So right now we're adding the East Coast. So I'm going to select something from the East Coast region. So in this case, let's say Ohio. These are AWS regions where your cloud team deploys their cloud applications. Now the system goes and discovers all of those VPCs, the virtual private clouds, which is where the applications are deployed, which is where the actual virtual machines are deployed, right? And this is the list that you can select from the list whatever you want to onboard into the Alkira environment. So I'm going to select, let's say, this one and this one. So I selected 2 VPCs in here, and I'm going to say add selected. Okay, now the system says, let's connect those. Now the question is, these are AWS workloads, right? AWS constructs. So I probably should go and learn how AWS does networking. And that's where I would encounter things like transit gateways, route domains, route propagation, VPC attachment options, all of the things, and how to operate those within the AWS console. That would be the normal route for somebody to try and sort of build a networking solution for AWS. Well, not in our case. In our case, we want to prompt you for a very basic things that are required to establish this network connectivity. And specifically, we ask you, what is the capacity? How much bandwidth do you want to provide to those VPCs? Again, some of those are grayed out, but that's just a permission thing. We can go all the way from a relatively tiny 100 megabits per second all the way to a very substantial multiples of 10 gigs connectivity. So you can go from providing a really small pipe or a very significant pipe to have the data in and out of those VPCs that you are attaching into the network. So I will select something reasonable, like a 1 gig. The next one is segment. So we support segmentation. We support true end-to-end segmentation. For those of you who are a networking people, that equates to a VRF, virtual routing and forwarding instances, virtualization of the routing table, true virtualization where we can support overlapping IP addresses across multiple segments and all kind of fun stuff that you can play with. But these are true VRF-like segmentation across the network. So I don't have any segments in here because I haven't created one. So let me quickly create a segment, and I will go here and I will say, this is my finance segment, right? So I'm onboarding some sort of a finance application. There is one requirement here that we have to provide an IP subnet for an internal use. That would be the subnet that is not used within the environment. Save it. Now I have the finance environment in here. Another cool thing that we have in here is the billing tags. So that is really good news for IT organizations, because typically when IT offers a solution, it takes the responsibility for all the infrastructure costs. Now, when you're operating in a cloud environment, cloud is very friendly to the fact is that whoever consumes the resource, whoever consumes that asset, pays for this. It's a distributed responsibility. And in this case, because we are running in the cloud and we're very cloud friendly, we introduced this concept of billing tags, where basically you can tag the resources with a certain sort of identifier that allows the IT organization, when they get the invoice from Alkira on these resources consumed, allows them to go back to the departments and do a departmental charge or a chargeback and ask for that money to be reimbursed back into the IT organization. So it's really a really cool thing that comes built in within the system. And because this is for finance, I'm going to select a finance tag. Now, my job is done, and I'm going to just go done and attach it. Now, you can see in here that on the map, I now have 2 VPCs that have appeared. And again, I have just attached 2 AWS VPCs into the network without learning anything about how AWS networking works. It was that simple. Okay, so I've done that. Now the next one is does it only work for AWS? Well, yeah, if you wanted to stay within a single cloud, you can do that. Obviously, these two VPCs that have been attached to the network can now talk to each other because they're in the same segment. They're both connected into the network. They can talk to each other. So if you are a single cloud customer, you can do that. But what if you're a multi-cloud customer? And how can you become a multi-cloud customer? It's really easy because your application teams could be going to another cloud like Microsoft Azure because that's where Windows desktops, virtual desktop infrastructure runs better than on AWS. It's cheaper, it's more performant, so they may do that. You may acquire a company that has a Azure deployment. So you didn't plan on it, but the company decided to acquire this, and now you have an Azure environment that you have to deal with. So do I need now to learn my Azure networking? Absolutely not. I go in here and I say, I would like to onboard Azure. I would authenticate to Azure, right? And I'm going to select something from US East. And I'm presented with a list of virtual networks, which is VNet. That's how Azure calls those cloud constructs. I'm going to select a VNet, edit, and now this screen should look super familiar to you because this is exactly the same screen that you had for AWS. You're not learning AWS networking. You're not learning Azure networking. You're just operating on the basic principles of networking. 1 gig of capacity. Let's put this in the same segment. Let's allow finance to pay for this. Add, done.
Hey, David, this is Bruce. Just wanted to chime in here. There's a couple of questions in the queue.
Yeah.
I wanted to bounce those off you. What's a policy on cloud services that may be operating in a country that does not have strict data privacy laws?
Does not have strict privacy laws.
Right. In other words,
Okay, that's I need to kind of digest that question. So, are we talking about how to keep the data within a certain country? Is that the intent of the question? I'm not sure if whoever asked the question, wants to clarify.
yeah, Tim, maybe you could add some more detail on that for us, so we can get back to you with an answer.
Okay.
The other question that came in, the finance segment that you just created in your example,
Right.
What is it used for?
So segments are used for isolation. Just like I created a finance segment, in fact, I plan to create another segment, and that could be, for example, your HR segment. Finance segment and HR segments cannot talk to each other. So this is the segmentation is done for the purposes of isolating workloads one from another on a network level. It also plays a role in security. So if one of the segments got compromised, let's say somebody somehow snuck into your cloud environment and compromised your HR workload and got access into that virtual machine, and now can launch further attacks, throughout the network, moving laterally across the workloads, across the environment. So by doing segmentation, you can prevent that, because that a compromised virtual machine cannot be used as a launch pad for attacks on other segments, because the segments are isolated.
Thanks, David. That's great.
Okay. So now we have basically single segment, but we have that across multiple clouds. So now these AWS VPCs can talk to each other. There is also a Microsoft Azure VNet that also can talk to these VPCs. So now I've created a multi-cloud environment where VNets can talk to the VPCs and VPCs can talk to each other across the Alkira provided infrastructure in here. So they're all attached to the Alkira Cloud Exchange Point. They all can talk to each other. Now, the next question is, okay, what if what if you have another region, right? So that's great, but this is only single region. Can I just have the same thing for a different region? Okay, so let's add another region. So what does another region mean? That means I need to add another cloud exchange point. So I'm going to go back into this screen, and I'm going to say, I'm now adding something in the East Coast. Okay, and I'll make that selection. And now you can see on the screen, now I have the East Coast that moved here on the bottom, and now there's a West Coast that appeared in here. There is nothing connected to it. I haven't connected anything, but one thing you can notice is that the same sort of this purple dot of the finance segment got extended, got automatically extended because across both segments, across both regions. So now I've stretched my network from coast to coast over high-speed, low-latency cloud backbone, right? I didn't have to buy any circuits or anything like that, and I didn't have to build any tunnels. It's all come inherently within the solution. And that segment, that finance segment, got automatically extended. So now I can go in here and I can add an AWS resource and on the West Coast, right? Again, authenticate into the account, but selecting a West Coast region and getting obviously a different list of the VPCs because those are for the West Coast. Selecting a VPC in here, adding, specifying the size, selecting the segment, specifying the billing tag, so it's all finance, and attaching that. And now I have a presence of my finance application in the West Coast. You can see now there is a VPC that was added on the West Coast. So now I've gone multi-region. So now I am multi-region, multi-cloud for finance application. Now, the question that was asked earlier is that, well, so what if I need another segment? What if I have another workload, another resource that does not belong to finance? Can I do that? All right, let's do that. So I'll go back to the East Coast and I can choose, now I have two, right? I can choose East Coast or West Coast, it doesn't matter. So I'll go here on the East Coast and I will say, let me add another AWS. I could have been choosing Azure, doesn't matter, but I'll choose AWS. I'll go here, authenticate to my AWS account again, choose the East Coast, right? Get again a list of VPCs. Let's say this VPC is going to be my HR VPC. I'm going to add that. Same screen. You guys are familiar with that. I'm going to give it capacity. In the segments, I'm going to say, let me add another segment. I'm going to call this one as an HR segment. Again, there's a subnet that needs to be allocated for our internal purposes. I'm going to save that. Now I have an HR segment. I'm going to select an HR segment. In a billing tags, I have HR. I'm going to select HR now because I want HR to pay for the expenses for that. I'm going to go and save it. Okay, let's see what happened. Let me zoom in into East Coast. You can see now that AWS has these two colors now, lines of two colors going through AWS. There's one, which we had before, which was this purple one, which has the two VPCs that we initially attached. And here's a new one that we just attached, and that is my HR application, right? If I click on it, I can see this is HR, right? They cannot talk to each other. My finance and HR is completely isolated because they are in two different segments. One more thing that you can notice is that now I have two dots for each one of those cloud exchange points, and they are automatically extended across both. So now my both finance and HR segments have been extended across my entire network. Just by creating an HR segment, I automatically apply this to my entire network. So as my network grows, as I add more locations into the network, those segments will continue being automatically expanded to those as well. If I need more segments, such as engineering, I can easily create another segment and attach another workloads into this in whatever region those workloads are. So you can see how sort of the logic of how it keeps on growing. All right, so that was cool on the cloud side, right? So now let me see what I can do on the on-prem side. So that's great that now clouds can talk to each other. So AWS can talk to across regions in the same segment, and I'll have another segment for AWS that they cannot talk to. I have Microsoft Azure that can talk to the finance applications. So that's great. But what about access to the cloud? So this is all stuff in the cloud. Now, how do I access to the cloud? Because I have an existing data center, right? This is not a greenfield, right? I have an existing data center. Can I connect my existing data center into this environment? Sure. All right, let's connect it to the East Coast. So I'm going to go on the other side of this, rectangle. and I'm going to select from here all the ways I can connect my data center. So there's different ways. We don't have the time to dive into each one of them, but as Doug alluded earlier, there's different options. There is things like direct connects and express routes. There's things like IPsec tunnels. There's things like SD-WAN fabrics. There's things like remote access VPN solutions. There's different things you can connect into the network. So in this case, I'm going to choose one which is sort of common and fairly simple to do. So I'm going to choose IPsec. So this is my data center in the East Coast that I'm going to connect to my network. So I'm going to call this DC East, right? Now, this data center has two routers. It has a router 1, and I'm going to add another router, and it has router 2. Router 1 is connected to an internet circuit and has this IP address from the service provider. Router 2 is connected to internet circuit and has this IP address from the service provider. So basically, 2 routers, 2 ISP circuits, full redundancy. Now that I have those routers defined, how are we going to exchange routing information? Because these are on-prem routers that are, running routing protocols that are connecting into this global network. I need some sort of way to exchange routes. I need to learn what routes exist on the branch office, or sorry, the data center in this case. I need to learn what prefixes exist on the cloud side. I need to make this exchange. So we support either static routing or BGP. Everybody uses BGP for obvious reasons that it's dynamic. So all I need to specify is that I'm going to use BGP autonomous system number. We automatically do BGP authentication and generate a BGP key for that, right? Now, a capacity, that should look really familiar to you guys. What is the capacity that I want to deliver to this data center? Again, from sort of really small to really big. So I'm going to use, let's say, 1 gig. Which segment I would like to be extended to this? So I would say, let's say, finance, and save the connector. Now you can see on the left-hand side, here is the data center that was added with 2 routers. Now this data center can talk to anything within that segment. So now I've added my existing data center into the mix. So not only am I now communicating across the clouds, I'm also communicating to the on-prem data center. So now I basically have not only single cloud, multi-cloud, but I also have a hybrid cloud environment where my data center can communicate to the cloud. Okay, that's good. Now, by the same token, I can go and add obviously more on-prem sites. So let me do something simple. And here on the US West Coast, I'm going to add another IPsec, and I'm going to say this is my branch office, right? I'm going to call this branch West, right? Again, it has a router, and because it's a branch office, let's say it has only 1 router. It has an ISP circuit with this IP address. We're going to do BGP route exchange. It's a smaller site. Let's give it 0.5 gig of capacity. It belongs to finance segment. Save the connector. Now you can see that I've added branch. Now the next question could be, is that how do I configure those routers on a data center and the branch, right? It's great that I've added them here to the map, but how do I actually go and configure them? Okay, so once this entire topology is provisioned, which means brought to life, because right now I'm just designing it, right? Once it's brought to life, we will actually generate a router configuration that you can take and paste into the router at the data center and the branch. So that configuration is going to include all of the stuff around IPsec, establishing IPsec communication, and all the BGP relevant parameters for those routers to talk BGP into the Alkira Cloud Exchange points. So all that stuff you saw that with like a BGP authentication and IPsec encryption, authentication keys, like all of that is all part of that config that we will spit out once the topology is provisioned. So whoever manages those routers can go and paste those things in. So by now we have built a pretty full network with multi-cloud, workloads, multi-segmented, multi-region, East Coast, West Coast, with on-prem data centers and on-prem branches, and all of that literally, in about half an hour? So that's pretty amazing. Now, something really cool is that how do I layer security on top of that? So that's really great that I have all this connectivity built together, but what about security? So that's the stuff that we haven't touched upon. It's besides the segmentation kind of a little bit of a security, but relatively basic. Let's add some more security. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and say plus. So what security would you like to add? So from the firewalling standpoint, we support 3 major firewall vendors today, which is the Palo Alto firewalls, Checkpoint firewalls, and Fortinet firewalls. So we are basically saying whatever firewall is your standard firewall, choose that. So I'm going to use Palo Alto Firewall because we see that a lot. So I'm choosing Palo Alto Firewall. Now the system says, okay, let's get the firewall going. So configure a few things, right? A few things that the system needs in order to get the firewall into the mix. So I'm going to call this, Palo Alto cluster. And am I using Panorama to manage it or not? Most of the customers are saying yes. We use Panorama. What is the IP address of the Panorama server? So I'm going to use the IP address. Now, Doug mentioned earlier about licensing, right? So do I have a license agreement with Palo Alto, which is a bring your own license? Or do I not have an agreement with them and I want to use pay as you go? So up to you. If you have an agreement with them, great, provide the details here. If you don't, just pay as you go. I select the feature set of the VM firewall. I select the firewall type. I select the firewall version, what I would like to be deployed. I select the administrator's account. If that fingered something. And that is the account that is going to be used on the firewall for like an administrator access. Now, how many firewalls do I need? Well, I don't really know how many firewalls do I need. I don't want to do too many firewalls because I'm going to be overpaying. I don't want to do too little firewalls because then I may be starving the firewalls and my performance may be bad. So how do I know what is the right size of this firewall? Okay, for that, we support something called Autoscale, which we allow the Alkira system to decide what is the minimum and what is the maximum number of firewalls we would like to be provisioned. So as more traffic comes in, more firewalls are spun up. As the traffic subsides, the firewall pool is reduced. So you are basically automatically right-sizing the firewalls based on a real-time capacity demand. That could be really good for different use cases. One of the most obvious ones is like a retail environment where you have working hours, you have non-working hours, you have peak season, off-peak season. So you don't want to go and continuously sort of mess with the firewalls and add firewalls, remove firewalls. This is all setting the system for sort of an autopilot, autoscale type of approach. And all the firewalls that are provisioned, they're all active. So they're active, no matter how many firewalls you put. So let me just, for the simplicity, put between 2 and 4 firewalls. So you're allowed to do, 2, 3, 4 firewalls, whatever is the capacity demand. These are the authentication keys coming from Panorama. So the Panorama administrator would provide those keys, right? And again, what are the segments I would like to get forwarded to the firewall? I would say, let's say, finance, and maybe I want to forward HR as well, and some management segments, and the capacity of the firewall, of a single firewall. Obviously, they can auto-scale horizontally, and optional billing tags. Let's keep that and save. All right, you can see a firewall in here. So now I have a firewall, and what happens to this? It's always available. We're going to make sure it's always highly available, never goes down. If something happens, we spin another one automatically. It is licensed. It is auto-scalable in case you need more capacity. So we take care of the entire life cycle management of the firewall and all of the complicated routing that comes with inserting the firewall into the environment, especially into the cloud environment. It is a very complicated problem to solve. Anybody who tried to tackle that on their own know that there's things like security VPCs and VNets and manipulations of routing domains. It's a really complicated problem to solve, and even further to scale, and to almost an impossible degree to make this multi-cloud, right? Now, we have just inserted this firewall, and the firewall administrator, that person who administers the policy of the firewall, can use their management tools. In this case, it's a Palo Alto Panorama, to push the security policy from the management console all the way into this firewall. So we're not changing the job of a security administrator. They still are responsible for all the security policies. What we are dramatically changing is what it takes to provision, scale, and insert the actual firewalls into the network. Now, the firewall is there, but I'm not sending any traffic to it. So I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new policy, right? And this is going to be traffic policy. And now, sky is the limit, right? What traffic would I like to send to this firewall, right? And I can select anything from the list of resources that I've provisioned. So for example, I can call this a multi-cloud policy. And I can say that for the finance segment, I want to send to the firewall all the traffic between this VPC and this VPC, right? And you can see they got highlighted here on the left, so you can see what you're selecting between these VPCs and this VNet, right? So anything that goes between these two VPCs and on AWS and this VNet on Azure needs to go into the firewall. Send all this traffic to the firewall. I enable this policy. I save the policy. It was that easy. If I were doing this in a traditional sort of a cloud native way, this would have been a lot of heavy lifting. Security VPCs, route domain manipulations, things like that, right? Super complicated in other way and super easy in this ways. And I can just come here and just look at the policy that I've just created and say, okay, what is it? It's a policy active between these VPCs, that VNet, send all the traffic into the Palo Alto firewall. And I can continue growing this and basically select anything I want. For example, I can go and say here, I want to add a new policy, and I'm going to say, this is my policy that is for data center to cloud. Okay, so I have my on-prem data center. It needs to communicate to the cloud. My security team says that communication has to go through the firewall. How do I insert a firewall into something that comes from on-prem, goes into the cloud? All right, let's do that. Finance segment, going from the data center, it got highlighted, going into, let's say, this VPC, even in a different region, right? Data center is in the east, that VPC is in the west, right? So I need to cross between regions. You can see this purple line appeared in here. I can still put a policy like that together and say, send everything to the firewall, save policy. That's it. Now I have another policy added that is here. Here we go. Says anything between this data center east and the VPC on the west, send everything to the Palo Alto firewall. So now my on-prem to cloud goes through the firewall. So you can see kind of the power of this intent-based policy that we are steering this traffic, we're symmetrically steering this traffic to these firewalls that are auto-scaling based on how much traffic is being sent to them. And the security administrator just is doing their job, defining the firewall policy, in this case, a Palo Alto firewall policy, through the Panorama tool, and applying that policy on the firewall. Works exactly in the same way if you have a checkpoint firewall or a Fortinet firewall. That is pretty awesome. And the very last thing I wanted to show you is something really nifty that we call Cloud Insights. So what is Cloud Insights? Many of the customers that we are engaging with. Oh, and one thing I didn't mention, by the way, before I go to Cloud Insights, is that now that I've sort of designed my network like that, well, how do I actually implement it, right? This was all sort of drawing board, right? Attach this, attach that, define firewall, define policy. So you can see in here on the right, the button that says pending changes. If I click on it, it basically says, here's all the stuff that you wanted to do. You wanted to add VPCs, you wanted to add firewalls, you wanted to add IPsec sites, all of that with a single provision button. You click this provision button and you go grab a drink. Come back in half an hour, this network is alive. your cloud workloads are connected, your branch communication is ready, the IPsec config is ready for you to deploy in a router so the routers can connect both from branches and data centers, your firewalls are up and running, your policies are up and running, the whole network that we've just built in the last 40 minutes or so is just live and running in about, but it depends on the size of the network. A network of this size is about maybe half an hour to an hour. That's pretty phenomenal from what we were able to do. Multi-cloud, multi-region, multi-segment with on-prem segmentation, with on-prem presence, firewall insertion, pretty cool stuff. And like I said, Cloud Insights. So it's right here in the menu called Cloud Insights. And what we many times encounter is that organizations don't really know what they have in a cloud, especially the IT teams. Like, I don't understand, my cloud team is going and doing something, but I don't really understand what they're doing, how much of that stuff is there, how many VPCs do I have, how many VNets do I have, how are they configured, because they may come to me and ask me to connect this stuff into the network. So I need to understand what is it. And is it properly configured, or is it just, they did their best and it's not really properly configured, right? So for that, we have the Cloud Insights that allows you to generate a complete inventory of your cloud workloads, right? And that includes the VPCs, all kind of security things like security groups and access lists, all kind of gateways. So this is anything that is relevant for a networking and security person within the IT organization as they look into the cloud, right? Into the multi-cloud. Anything in here can be clicked on, and this is AWS, and I can get the same thing for Azure, sort of different terms, but the same logic. And anything you see in here, I can click on. So I can say, show me all the VPCs. Oh, these are the VPCs. Can I get a little bit more details around that VPC? Sure. Here are all the subnets that are in there, routing tables, security groups, IGW, internet gateways, all the stuff that happens in the cloud is completely transparent to you without ever leaving the Alkira platform. You can see all the configurations that are done in the cloud. But the next question you ask, is it a good news or is it a bad news? So I get this inventory, which is awesome. Now I can understand my cloud environment, but are they properly configured or maybe not? So for that, we have the insights. So what insights are, it allows you to identify or validate your cloud environment against 4 criteria for best practices. It's a best practices around security, a best practices around performance and reliability, best practices around cost optimization and operations. So you may be vulnerable on things like security. For example, somebody may have created an IGW in that environment and a NAT gateway, and that allows the developer to connect from outside into that VPC, but it hasn't been secured by a firewall. So anywhere they can connect, an attacker can connect, right? So you want to plug that hole, right? You want to do it the right way, and the right way is to take that workload and connect it into the Alkira environment where we can put a firewall in front of it and make it a secure connection. So we want to make a life of that developer. We don't want to make their life difficult. We just want to provide a proper security control and a proper connectivity method for them to access their resources. So you can evaluate your environment against all the discovered environment against this criteria of best practices and get a report once in a while of how things are doing, right? And it can send you, a daily report, a weekly report, a monthly report, where you can get details around here are all the new resources that were added to the cloud. Here are the new insights, the new deviations from the best practices that happened in the cloud environment. Allows you to continuously sort of have get a handle on what's happening in the cloud and new stuff added to the cloud and best practices of doing that. We think about that around the governance process of where you can basically now go to the cloud teams and make things right, not just let them do shadow IT, so to speak, but make things right and connect them into the network in the right way with the proper security controls. So that is the Cloud Insights. You can register for sort of like a free audit of your environment. And with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to John that wanted to provide a little bit more more color around those things. So I appreciate your attention. And sorry if this was too much and too fast.
Thanks, David. Really appreciate your time. Alkira has been an excellent partner and a pleasure to work with. There's a lot of different challenges as we talk to all of our customers in connecting the cloud environments to on-prem, to our remote users. It can seem complicated. This is a solution that is a modern way of building that network connectivity, and also you're able to use infrastructure as code and some of these more automatic modern ways of building and monitoring connectivity in the network. I know for a lot of us, the public cloud space is like a black box on the network side, and this helps bring visibility. I know we're right at the top of the hour, so I'd just like to say that for the questions that have come in, I think we will have our account managers reach out. We can schedule a time to dig a lot deeper. Also, if there's something here that you saw that you have a question on, we would love to have our cloud team meet with you, bring Alkira in, and we can understand your use case, understand what you're trying to solve, and see how we can best address those needs. Also, the cloud insights that David talked about, we can come in and offer that service for free, whether you're an existing Alkira customer or not. We can set you up so that we can very quickly pull down an inventory and give you insights into your security, insights around cost optimization, your performance reliability. And then there's even, as David talked about, built-in rules that point out some of the best practice ways of configuring this environment. So I'd love to meet with you and dig a little deeper, show you how we can bring visibility and help you secure these environments. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. And boy, we really appreciate our speakers today, David and Doug and John. Great information and very relevant, and hopefully our audience gained a lot of useful information out of this. I did record the session, so we'll be sending out a link to that in the near future. So thank you so much for attending today. And that it was wonderful to have just demo format and very few slides, and I think we all appreciate that. So thanks for your time, and I hope everybody has a great day.